Commander Vextal of the Yulari Dominion Fleet sat in his quarters aboard the Sovereign of Ashes, reviewing the third draft of his tactical assessment. Around him, the ship hummed with the quiet efficiency of a vessel designed for war. His claws clicked against the data slate as he scrolled through the report, each line feeling more inadequate than the last. He had served the Dominion for 63 cycles. He had participated in the subjugation of 12 star systems. He had watched civilizations crumble under the weight of Yulari military doctrine. Nothing in his long career had prepared him for the creatures from Terra. The first engagement had been textbook. His battle group, the 7th Predator Fleet, had encountered a human reconnaissance squadron near the Margrave Nebula. Yulari sensors had identified the ships as primitive, fusion drives, kinetic weaponry, no energy shielding to speak of. The tactical computer had assigned a 97.3% probability of victory within the first exchange. The humans had immediately executed a maneuver that should have destroyed them. They had dispersed their formation into something that resembled panic. 3 ships had accelerated toward the Yulari battle line. The remaining 2 had cut power entirely, drifting dead in the void while their comrades charged. Standard doctrine would have required concentrated fire on the approaching vessels, eliminating them before they could close to weapons range. That was what the tactical computer recommended. That was what any rational commander would do. Vextal had ordered exactly that. His gunnery officers had locked targeting solutions. The human ships had entered the engagement envelope. And then, at the precise moment when annihilation should have occurred, the 3 approaching vessels had detonated their own reactors. Not as weapons, as decoys. The energy signature of 3 fusion reactors breaching simultaneously had blinded Yulari sensors for 1.8 seconds. During that interval, the 2 dead ships had reactivated their drives and positioned themselves directly behind the Yulari formation, a position they should not have been able to reach with their limited acceleration capabilities. They had exploited the sensor blindness with precision that bordered on prescience. The engagement had ended with 2 Yulari cruisers crippled and a third destroyed. The humans had escaped into the nebula's radiation interference. Vextal's report had listed the event as a tactical anomaly requiring further analysis. His superiors had rejected it. "Commander," the Admiral's message had read, "this reads like fiction. Are you suggesting that a species with sublight propulsion defeated 3 of our vessels through a suicide maneuver they themselves survived? The mathematics do not support your assessment. Resubmit with proper tactical analysis." He had resubmitted. He had included sensor logs, trajectory calculations, and a detailed breakdown of human acceleration capabilities that proved the maneuver was physically possible, if one accounted for the humans' willingness to risk annihilation at every moment of the engagement. The second rejection had been more blunt. "Your report has been flagged for quality review. The Dominion does not tolerate fabrication from its field commanders." Vextal had spent 3 days attempting to understand what he had witnessed. He had reviewed the sensor logs 1,000 times. He had run simulations. He had consulted with his tactical officers, who offered nothing but confusion. The humans had won through a series of decisions that no trained military mind would have made. They had acted like beings who had never studied warfare, who operated on instinct rather than doctrine, who seemed to find the entire concept of tactical predictability an amusing suggestion rather than a rule. The third draft on his data slate represented his best attempt to translate human combat behavior into something the Dominion's military bureaucracy would accept. He stared at the opening paragraph. "The species designated human demonstrates consistent deviation from established tactical norms. Their engagement patterns suggest either profound incompetence or a form of psychological warfare designed to induce decision paralysis in opposing commanders. This officer recommends further study before any major offensive operation is authorized against human-held positions. It was the best he could do. It was honest. It was accurate. It would never be believed. Vextel transmitted the report and waited. The response came faster than expected, not from military command but from Fleet Administrative Services. His report had been flagged, categorized, and reassigned, not to tactical analysis, not to strategic planning, to the Dominion Entertainment Division. The official notification read, "Your submission has been accepted for distribution across Yulari comedy networks. Congratulations, Commander. Your creative work has been deemed valuable to Dominion morale." Vextel stared at the message. His claws left gouges in the armrest of his chair. He had spent 6 decades building a reputation as a serious military commander. He had destroyed worlds. He had commanded fleets. And now, Fleet Administrative Services had classified his tactical analysis as a joke. He reread the message 3 times before the full weight of it settled across his consciousness. The Dominion was laughing at him. Worse, the Dominion was laughing at the humans. They would send more ships. They would engage again. They would treat the humans as a threat that could be defeated through superior numbers and conventional tactics. And when they did, Vextel knew exactly what would happen. He had seen it. He had survived it. The humans would do something that no one expected, something that made no sense, something that would shatter formations and cripple fleets. And then they would escape, leaving behind nothing but confusion and dead Yulari. The commander rose from his chair, his massive frame filling the small quarters. He had one message to send, one warning. Not to his superiors who had already dismissed him, not to the Entertainment Division who had turned his report into a laughing matter. To the 4th Fleet, currently massing for an assault on the human colony at Epsilon 9. A fleet that was preparing for a standard engagement against a primitive species that had just proven itself anything but. He composed the message with shaking claws. "Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage. The humans cannot be predicted. They will not follow doctrine. They will not act rationally. I have seen their tactics. I have survived their attacks. Request permission to debrief 4th Fleet Command before any offensive action is taken." He transmitted the message. The response arrived in less than a minute. "Commander Vextel, your humor is appreciated, but your intervention is unnecessary. 4th Fleet operations are classified. Please direct further comedy submissions to the appropriate channels." Vextel closed his eyes. The Yulari Dominion was going to war with a species that had already demonstrated the ability to defeat superior forces through tactical chaos. And no one would believe him because his warnings were too absurd to be anything but comedy. The first shots of the next engagement would be fired in 6 cycles. Vextel began his 4th draft. This one would be different. This one would include nothing but raw data, no analysis, no conclusions. Let them draw their own. Let them see the patterns. Let them understand that the humans were doing something that their tactical computers could not process. He wrote until his claws ached. He wrote until the data slate's memory was full. He wrote the truth in numbers and trajectories and energy signatures. And when he was finished, he transmitted it to the one place where truth might still matter. The battlefield. The Epsilon 9 colony had been established for 3 standard years. Its population numbered 12,000 humans, mostly agricultural specialists and support personnel. Military presence had been minimal, a single orbital defense platform, 2 squadrons of outdated fighters, and a ground garrison of 500 soldiers equipped with weapons that the Yulari Tactical Database classified as archaic projectile launchers. 4th Fleet had been dispatched with the expectation of a rapid pacification. 6 capital ships, 18 cruisers, and enough troop transports to carry 50,000 occupation forces. The Yulari military machine had moved with its characteristic precision, forming a blockade around the planet and demanding surrender. The humans had responded with a transmission that the Yulari communications officers initially believed to be a translation error. The human representative had said, and this was recorded and verified, "We're going to do something very stupid. Please don't attack until we're done." The Yulari admiral had ordered immediate bombardment. The orbital defense platform had been destroyed in the opening volley. The fighter squadrons had been eliminated within moments. The ground garrison, facing annihilation from orbit, should have surrendered or been eradicated. Instead, the humans had activated every emergency beacon, every distress signal, and every civilian communication channel on the planet. They had flooded the Yulari sensor networks with transmissions, not coded military traffic, but civilian broadcasts, entertainment feeds, agricultural reports, personal messages between families. The sheer volume of data had overwhelmed the Yulari electronic warfare systems, creating a noise barrier that made orbital targeting impossible. The admiral had ordered the fleet to reposition, to find clear firing solutions through the interference. The ships had begun their maneuver. And then the humans had detonated their own planetary power grid. Not as a weapon, as a light source. The entire surface of Epsilon 9 had illuminated with the intensity of a small star, flooding every optical sensor in the fleet with an overload of visual data. For 3.7 seconds, the Yulari crews had been blind. And in that blindness, the humans had launched every remaining military asset they possessed. Not at the ships, at themselves. Ground-to-orbit missiles, designed for planetary defense, had been retargeted to strike the human garrison positions. The explosions had been spectacular. They had also, critically, released a cloud of debris that expanded into orbit at velocities sufficient to threaten the Yulari ships, not as weapons, but as obstacles. A field of fragmented metal that the fleet had to avoid, their evasive maneuvers breaking formation. In the chaos, a single human cargo vessel had launched from the surface. It was unarmed. It had no military value whatsoever. It had also been filled with 38 tons of what humans called synthetic ammonia. The cargo vessel had been destroyed by the Yulari point defense systems before it could reach the fleet. The explosion had been unusual. The ammonia had reacted with the atmosphere of the planet in a way that produced a massive cloud of reflective particles, turning the space above Epsilon 9 into a mirror that disrupted all remaining visual and electromagnetic targeting. The Fourth Fleet had spent the next 47 minutes attempting to locate human positions on the surface. They had found none. The entire population had vanished into underground shelters that the Yulari sensors could not penetrate through the particulate cloud. The admiral had ordered a withdrawal to re-establish sensor contacts. The withdrawal had been executed with textbook precision. And then the humans had attacked. A single ground-based missile launcher, previously thought destroyed, had emerged from a concealed position. It had fired a single warhead at the retreating fleet. The warhead was slow. It was unguided. It should have been intercepted easily. The Yulari point defense systems, still calibrating from the sensor disruption, had missed it. The warhead had struck the fleet's supply vessel, a massive cargo hauler filled with ammunition and fuel. The explosion had been significant. The supply vessel had detonated in a chain reaction that consumed 2 cruisers and damaged a third. The debris cloud had expanded, forcing the remaining ships to scatter. In the chaos, the humans had launched 6 more missiles from 6 different locations. They had all missed. They had also forced the Yulari ships to continue evasive maneuvers, preventing the fleet from reforming. After 3 hours of this, the admiral had ordered a full withdrawal to re-establish tactical cohesion. The Fourth Fleet had retreated to the edge of the system, licking its wounds and attempting to understand what had just occurred. They had lost 3 ships. They had sustained damage to 5 more. They had failed to pacify a colony defended by what should have been a negligible military force. Vextel had reviewed the engagement data in detail. He had watched the sensor logs. He had analyzed the human tactics, and he had reached a conclusion that he had transmitted in his original report. The humans had won by losing. Every human action had been designed to appear as a mistake, a failure, an act of desperation. The overwhelmed garrison, the foolish transmission, the suicidal ground-to-orbit missile launches, the cargo vessel filled with industrial chemicals. It had all looked like incompetence. It had all been planned. The humans had manipulated the Yulari fleet into a position where every standard military response had created a new problem. They had turned the Yulari's own tactical efficiency against them. The fleet had been too precise, too predictable. They had done exactly what the humans had expected them to do. And in doing so, they had lost. Vextel's fourth report, the one filled with nothing but raw data, had included this analysis. He had included the evidence. He had shown how the humans had used Yulari doctrine against them, how they had exploited every weakness in the standard operating procedures. His report had been transmitted to the field. It had been intended for the Fourth Fleet commanders, who might have benefited from understanding what they were facing. Instead, it had been intercepted by Dominion intelligence and flagged for publication review. The entertainment division had seen the raw data and had somehow found it even funnier than his earlier reports. They had broadcast the engagement as an example of human tactical creativity, presenting it as a case study in how primitive species might accidentally achieve minor successes against superior forces. They had made the humans into a joke. Vextel's claws had left permanent marks on his chair as he watched the entertainment feed. He had seen his analysis transformed into comedy. He had watched the Yulari audience laugh at the human antics and congratulate themselves on their superior military thinking. He had known in that moment that the Dominion was doomed. Because the humans weren't fighting a war, they were performing, and the Yulari were the audience. The Yulari Entertainment Division had outdone itself. The broadcast of Human Tactical Analysis, Volume 1, had achieved viewership numbers that exceeded even the most optimistic projections. Across Dominion space, citizens gathered in entertainment complexes to watch the absurdity of human military operations. The footage of cargo ships filled with ammonia, the self-destructive missile launches, the chaotic transmission storms, it had all been edited into a seamless narrative of incompetence. Vextel watched from his quarters as the Yulari public laughed at what he knew to be a mask of horror. He saw his career, his reputation, his every warning transformed into punchlines and visual gags. The entertainment division had even added a laugh track to the engagement sequences, as though the destruction of Yulari ships required comedic accompaniment. The Admiralty, predictably, had made the situation worse. Commander Vextel, the official communication had read, "The High Council has reviewed your submissions and wishes to express their gratitude for your service to Dominion morale. Your analysis of human combat behavior has provided valuable material for public entertainment. In recognition of your contributions, you are hereby promoted to the rank of Commodore and reassigned to the Fleet Entertainment Liaison Office." Vextel had read the message 3 times. He had then destroyed his data slate and requested a physical meeting with the Admiralty. The request had been denied. His new duties began immediately. He was to compile additional human tactical analysis for public consumption. He was to attend a formal commendation ceremony where he would be honored for his creative contributions to Dominion culture. The ceremony had been a nightmare. Vextel had stood on the platform, his dress uniform pressed to perfection, his medals gleaming under the ceremonial lights. The Admiral had spoken at length about the importance of morale in maintaining military superiority. The Entertainment Division head had discussed the value of unexpected perspectives in expanding cultural horizons. The audience had applauded with enthusiasm. And Vextel had stood there, a warning on the tip of his tongue that no one would hear. The Admiral had presented him with a plaque. It read, "For exceptional contributions to Dominion spirit and cultural enrichment." Below the text, a holographic display showed a looped sequence of human tactics: the cargo ship explosion, the missile launches, the sensor blinding. It was a comedy reel. "Commodore," the Admiral had said, his voice carrying across the ceremony hall, "your work has brought joy to millions. The High Council has approved additional resources for your office. We expect regular submissions. The public demands more human comedy." Vextel had accepted the plaque. He had thanked the Admiral. He had smiled for the recording devices. And then he had returned to his quarters and spent 3 hours attempting to compose a report that would be taken seriously. He had failed. Every time he tried to describe human tactics in military terminology, the words came out wrong. They described chaos. They described incompetence. They described a species that should have been destroyed by its own stupidity. They did not describe the truth. The truth was that the humans were winning. The Fourth Fleet had not engaged them again. The Third Fleet had been dispatched to the Epsilon 9 system, but they had encountered similar resistance. The humans had done something even more absurd. They had launched a counteroffensive against a Yulari supply depot using civilian freighters armed with what appeared to be industrial cutting lasers. The attack had failed. The freighters had been destroyed. But the supply depot had been damaged, and the Fourth Fleet had been forced to delay its next operation while waiting for replacements. Vextel had seen the pattern. The humans weren't trying to win engagements. They were trying to confuse the Yulari military machine. They were forcing the Dominion to react to situations that made no tactical sense, to expend resources on unexpected problems, to question every assumption about what constituted a valid military operation. And it was working. The Yulari war effort had slowed to a crawl. The commanders who faced the humans were hesitant, uncertain. They had been trained to expect predictable enemies, enemies who followed doctrine, enemies who fought wars the way wars were supposed to be fought. The humans fought like performers in a theater of the absurd. The entertainment division had broadcast the supply depot engagement as Human Tactical Analysis, Volume 2. The footage of civilian freighters charging a military installation, their industrial lasers flaring against the Yulari shields, had been edited with dramatic music and comedic sound effects. The public had loved it. Vextel's new office had been inundated with requests for additional human content. Citizens wanted to see more of these delightfully incompetent creatures. They wanted to watch the primitive species struggle against the might of the Dominion. They had no idea that they were watching their defeat. Vextel sat in his new office, surrounded by the trappings of his promotion. The plaque from the ceremony hung on the wall. His data slate was filled with requests for more comedy. His staff had already begun compiling the next volume of Human Tactical Analysis. He had a choice. He could continue to produce the entertainment that the Dominion demanded. He could keep the public laughing while the military machine slowly ground to a halt against human unpredictability. He could wait for the moment when the joke turned tragic. Or he could try one more time to make them understand. He opened a new document on his data slate. He titled it Human Tactical Analysis, Volume 0. He began to write, not for entertainment, but for truth. He described the human tactics in precise military language. He explained how every mistake was actually a calculated manipulation. He outlined the pattern he had seen emerging across every engagement. He wrote for 12 hours straight. When he was finished, he had produced a document that was the opposite of everything the Dominion wanted to hear. He transmitted it to the Admiralty, to the Intelligence Division, to the High Council itself. He received a response within minutes. "Commodore Vextel, your sense of humor continues to impress. The High Council has approved additional resources for your entertainment division. We look forward to Volume 3. Vextel closed his eyes. The laughter in his ears was the sound of his civilization's funeral. The third volume of Human Tactical Analysis had been released to even greater acclaim than the previous installments. The entertainment division had outdone themselves, adding sophisticated visual effects and a narrative arc that framed human military operations as a continuing comedy of errors. Vextel's office had become a production studio. His staff had grown to include writers, editors, and sound designers who transformed his tactical reports into entertainment content. The raw data from the Epsilon 9 engagement, once a source of professional humiliation, had become the foundation of a cultural phenomenon. The Yulari public couldn't get enough of the humans. They watched the analysis shows in massive viewing complexes, their laughter echoing through spaces that had once been used for military briefings. The humans had become symbols of incompetence, proof of Dominion superiority, confirmation that the great Yulari military machine could overcome any obstacle. Vextel attended the premiere of Volume 3 in the capital city, surrounded by admirals and council members who had no idea what they were cheering for. The holographic presentation showed a human fleet engagement near a secondary colony. The humans had attempted a flanking maneuver that had resulted in their ships colliding with each other. The footage had been slowed down for maximum comedic effect. The audience had laughed until they couldn't breathe. They hadn't noticed that the human ships had been executing a deception. The collision had been staged, a controlled impact designed to produce debris that blinded Yulari sensors, while the humans repositioned for a precise volley that destroyed a cruiser. The comedy had masked the reality of a successful human tactical operation. Vextel had sat through the entire premiere, his claws digging into his palms, his expression frozen in a smile that he had practiced for this occasion. He had laughed when the audience laughed. He had applauded when the presentation ended. He had accepted congratulations from admirals who had no idea that they were celebrating their own tactical failures. After the premiere, he had been summoned to a private meeting. The Admiralty had assembled in a secure chamber, their faces showing the gravity that Vextel had been missing for too long. For a moment, he had hoped that someone had finally understood. "Commodore," the Admiral had said, "we have a request from the High Council. The human comedy broadcasts have been extremely popular, but we need something new, something fresh. The public is demanding more human content, and we need to deliver." Vextel had waited for the question. It had come from a different direction than he had expected. "We understand that you've been analyzing human military operations in depth," the Admiral had continued. "We need you to produce a series of educational materials, training videos that show our troops how to recognize human tactical patterns. We want to use your analysis to improve our military effectiveness." Vextel had felt something cold settle in his stomach. They wanted him to train their troops, to teach them how to fight the humans, using the same analysis they had dismissed as comedy. "Admiral," he had said, "my analysis has been, perhaps it would be better to consult with field commanders who have directly engaged the humans. I can provide contact information for officers who have survived human encounters." The Admiral had waved away the suggestion. "Your analysis is comprehensive. It has been thoroughly reviewed by the entertainment division and found to be accurate in its depiction of human tactics. We've already begun production on a training series based on your work." They had produced training videos. They had used footage from the comedy broadcasts. They had told troops that human tactics were a series of mistakes that could be exploited through standard military responses. Vextel had watched the first training video and felt something inside him break. The instructors were teaching Yulari soldiers to expect incompetence. They were preparing the troops for an enemy that didn't exist. He had returned to his office and opened the document he had written after the ceremony. Human Tactical Analysis, Volume 0. The one that no one had taken seriously. the one that warned of human intentional unpredictability, calculated chaos, deliberate tactical absurdity. He had transmitted it again, this time with a personal request for a meeting with the intelligence division. The response had been unexpected. "Commodore Vextel, your request has been forwarded to the relevant department. Please await further instructions." It had been 6 cycles. He was still waiting. But the communications traffic from the war zone had begun to change. The comedy broadcasts were still popular in the core worlds. But the military reports from the front lines told a different story. Human attacks were increasing. Yulari casualties were rising. The fleets that faced the humans were suffering from what the medical corps diagnosed as command hesitation, an inability to make tactical decisions quickly in the face of human unpredictability. The humans had won again, not through numbers or technology, but through the simple act of being so unpredictable that trained military minds could not process their behavior fast enough to respond. Vextel had started collecting the war reports. He had compiled a database of human engagements, each one analyzed in detail. He had identified patterns in the chaos, a structure beneath the absurdity. The humans weren't random. They were methodical in their unpredictability. They had developed a doctrine that weaponized confusion itself. He had submitted his findings to the intelligence division. He had requested a meeting with anyone who would listen. He had offered to demonstrate the patterns in person, to prove that the humans were doing something that no one had recognized. He had received no response. The intelligence division was too busy screening the comedy content for potential security risks. Vextel had sat in his office, surrounded by the evidence of his civilization's blindness, and made a decision. He would find someone who understood. He would find someone in the intelligence apparatus who could see past the laughter. He would find someone like T-Cran. The intercepted transmissions arrived in Vextel's office without warning. A Yulari intelligence station had picked up human communications traffic near the frontier, and the standard protocols had forwarded it to the entertainment division for analysis. The humans were broadcasting their own version of the conflict. Vextel had expected propaganda. He had expected the humans to frame their victories as heroic struggles against overwhelming odds. He had not expected what he found. The human broadcasts showed their military operations exactly as they had occurred. The cargo ships filled with ammonia, the self-destructive missile launches, the sensor blinding, but instead of comedic editing, the humans had presented the footage with a different purpose. A human officer appeared on the screen. His face was calm, his voice measured. He spoke to an audience of human troops, and his words were translated by the Yulari intelligence systems. "You've seen the Yulari entertainment broadcasts. You know they're laughing at us. They think we're fools. They think our tactics are mistakes. They think we're winning through luck and incompetence." The officer paused. His expression didn't change. "They're wrong. We know what we're doing. We've known from the beginning. Every engagement has been planned. Every mistake has been calculated. We're not fighting a war the way the Yulari expect. We're fighting a war the way no one expects." The footage showed a human fleet engagement. The humans were vastly outnumbered. They should have been destroyed. Instead, they executed a series of maneuvers that looked like chaos, ships firing at nothing, accelerating toward positions that made no tactical sense, performing evasive patterns that should have put them in each other's way. The Yulari fleet had hesitated. They had tried to predict the human movements. They had failed. The human ships had slipped through gaps in the Yulari formation and destroyed 2 cruisers before retreating. The officer continued, "We've studied them. We know their doctrine. We know their expectations. We know what they think of us, and we've used that against them. Every joke they tell about our incompetence is a victory for us. Every laugh they share is a confirmation that our strategy is working." Vextel watched the rest of the broadcast with growing horror. The humans weren't just fighting a war. They were fighting a psychological campaign. They had identified the Yulari weakness, the need for tactical predictability, and they had exploited it to a degree that Vextal had never imagined. The entertainment division had compiled the footage and released it as a special edition. Human Propaganda Attempts had been the title, and it had been presented as an example of the humans' desperate efforts to maintain morale. The broadcast had been a hit. Vextal had watched it and seen the truth. The humans weren't trying to maintain morale. They were sending a message that said, "We know you're laughing at us and we don't care because your laughter is exactly what we want." He had started to understand the depth of the human strategy. They weren't just unpredictable. They were deliberately performing unpredictability. They had created an entire doctrine based on the principle that the best way to defeat a predictable enemy was to be completely unpredictable. And they had succeeded. The Yulari fleets were hesitating. The commanders were uncertain. The troops were confused. The entire military machine was struggling to process what it was seeing. The human broadcasts had continued. They had shown the Yulari entertainment content to their own troops. They had encouraged their soldiers to laugh at their own tactics. They had turned the war into a joke from both sides. And the joke was on the Yulari. Vextal had compiled a report on the human broadcasts. He had submitted it to the intelligence division with a request for immediate action. The humans were winning, and they were doing it through the entertainment division's own broadcasts. The response had been predictable. "Commodore Vextal, your analysis has been forwarded to the appropriate department. Please continue your work on human entertainment content." He was trapped. Every warning he sent was laughed at. Every analysis he produced was turned into comedy. Every attempt to make the Dominion understand was met with dismissal. And the humans knew it. They had to know. They were watching the same broadcasts, reading the same reports, understanding the same reality. Vextal had started to wonder what the humans would do next. They had demonstrated their ability to exploit Yulari doctrine. They had shown their understanding of Dominion psychology. They had proven their capacity for strategic thinking that looked like chaos. What would they do when they realized that no one in the Dominion would believe the truth? He found the answer in the next intercepted transmission. A human intelligence officer had appeared on the screen, her voice calm, her eyes sharp. "They won't believe you. They think you're incompetent. They think we're lucky. They think this is all a joke." She paused. A small smile crossed her face. "So let's give them what they want. Let's make it even funnier. Let's show them what real chaos looks like." Vextal had watched the transmission 3 times. He had seen the confidence in the human officer's eyes. He had heard the certainty in her voice. The humans were about to escalate. They were about to do something even more absurd, even more unpredictable, even more calculated to confound Yulari expectations. And the Dominion would laugh at it. Vextal had closed the transmission and opened a new document. He had begun to write, not for entertainment, not for training, for himself. He had started to record everything he knew about the humans, everything he had observed, everything he had deduced. He had written a document that would be his testimony, his warning, his final attempt to make someone understand. He had titled it "The Joke That Kills." He had sent it to a single recipient, an intelligence officer who had requested his original analysis, an officer who had seen something that no one else had seen. An officer named Tikran. Tikran had requested the meeting in person. Her message had been brief. "Commodore Vextal, I have reviewed your original analysis. I believe there is something you haven't told anyone. I need to discuss this with you in person." The meeting had been arranged in a secure facility, far from the entertainment division's influence. Tikran had arrived alone, her uniform impeccable, her expression unreadable. She was younger than Vextal had expected, her features sharp with intelligence. "Commodore," she had said, "I've been reading your reports, all of them, including the ones you thought no one would take seriously." Vextel had nodded carefully. "You understand what I've been trying to say. I understand that you've been dismissed as a comedian when you're actually the only officer in the Dominion who understands what we're facing." Tikran had settled into a chair across from him. "I want to hear everything, the truth, not the comedy." He had told her. He had described the first engagement, the second, the third. He had outlined the pattern he had observed, the way the humans turned predictability into a weapon. He had shown her the data, the analysis, the conclusions that no one had believed. Tikran had listened without interruption. When he had finished, she had leaned forward, her eyes intense. "The humans know," she had said. "They know how we're interpreting their tactics. They know we're laughing at them, and they're using that knowledge." "I came to the same conclusion," Vextel had said. "The entertainment division's broadcasts are making it worse. The humans see us treating their tactics as comedy, and they're adapting to make themselves seem even more absurd. It's a feedback loop." Tikran had nodded. "They've created an operational doctrine based on our own assumptions. We expect predictability, so they give us chaos. We expect rationality, so they give us absurdity. We expect military behavior, so they give us entertainment." She had paused. "Do you know what they're doing right now, this moment?" Vextel had shaken his head. "The Fifth Fleet is massing for an assault on a human colony near the Harkin Nebula. The humans know. They've known for weeks, and they're planning something." Tikran had activated a holographic display. It showed the Fifth Fleet's positions, their ships, their supply lines. Standard military deployment, textbook planning. "They think they're going to face predictable resistance," Tikran had said. "They think the humans will defend the colony with standard tactics. They've been studying the entertainment broadcasts. They think they know what to expect." Vextel had studied the display. "What are the humans planning?" "We don't know. That's the problem. We've tried to predict their response, and we've failed. Every scenario we've modeled has been contradicted by their actual behavior." She had looked at him. "That's why I'm here. You've been studying them longer than anyone. You've seen the pattern. I need you to help me understand what they're going to do." Vextel had felt a weight settle on him. He had been waiting for this moment. He had been preparing for it. But now that it had arrived, the responsibility was almost overwhelming. He had accessed his personal database, the one he had been compiling in secret, the one that contained everything he had learned about human tactical behavior. "They're going to do something unexpected," he had said. "Something that doesn't make sense. Something that will confuse the Fifth Fleet and disrupt their formations." "That's not specific enough," Tikran had said. "I need to know what they're going to do. I need to warn the fleet." Vextel had studied the data. He had reviewed every human engagement, every tactic, every pattern, and then he had seen it. "Look at the supply lines," he had said. "The Fifth Fleet is depending on regular resupply from the Harkin Nebula Depot. If the humans cut those supply lines, they don't have the ships to reach the depot," Tikran had said. "The depot is behind the fleet's defensive perimeter." "They don't need ships," Vextel had said. "Look at the pattern. Every time the humans have faced a superior force, they've found a way to bypass the engagement. They don't fight battles they can't win. They fight campaigns." He had pulled up a schematic of the Harkin Nebula. The nebula itself is a hazard. Radiation, debris, unstable energy fields. Standard doctrine avoids the nebula. That's why the depot is positioned on the safe side. Tikran had understood. The humans wouldn't avoid the nebula, they would go through it. "They've done it before," Vextel had said. "At the Margrave Nebula engagement, they used radiation interference to mask their movements. The nebula isn't an obstacle to them, it's an opportunity." Tikran had activated a secure channel. "I need to warn the Fifth Fleet if the humans are planning an attack through the nebula." Vextel had stopped her. They've already done it. Look at the timing. The Fifth Fleet is massing for the assault. Their supply ships are vulnerable. The humans would have known that. They would have planned for it. He had pulled up the timeline. The attack on the supply line would have been launched before the fleet completed its massing. By the time the fleet is ready to assault the colony, their supply line will already be gone. They'll have no choice but to withdraw. T. Cran had stared at the timeline. Then, we've already lost the campaign. The Fifth Fleet won't be able to sustain operations without resupply. That's the point, Vextel had said. The humans don't need to destroy the fleet. They just need to make it impossible for the fleet to operate. They're not fighting a war of attrition. They're fighting a war of logistics. T. Cran had sat back, her expression thoughtful. You've understood this from the beginning. You've known what they're doing. Known and been dismissed, Vextel had said. Every warning I've sent has been ignored. Every analysis I've produced has been turned into entertainment. The Dominion is laughing while the humans are winning. T. Cran had looked at him with something that might have been respect. I believe you. I believe everything you've said, and I'm going to do something about it. What are you going to do? She had stood up. I'm going to show the Admiralty the evidence, not your analysis, not your warnings, the raw data, the numbers, the undeniable proof that the humans are doing exactly what you've said they're doing. Vextel had watched her leave. He had felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in cycles. Hoping. T. Cran had presented the evidence to the Admiralty. She had shown them the patterns in human tactical behavior. She had demonstrated the correlation between human operations and Yulari logistical vulnerabilities. She had proven, with unassailable data, that the humans were winning through calculated unpredictability. The Admiralty had listened. They had reviewed the evidence. They had seen the numbers. And they had asked for a comedic edit. Intelligence Officer T. Cran, the Admiral had said, your presentation is certainly interesting, but the High Council has determined that public morale is essential to the war effort. The entertainment broadcasts have been effective in maintaining support for the campaign. T. Cran had looked at the Admiral. She had looked at the assembled commanders, and she had understood what Vextel had understood long ago. Admiral, with respect, she had said, the broadcasts are a problem. The humans are using them against us. They're adapting their tactics to appear even more absurd. Every time we laugh at them, we're confirming that their strategy is working. The Admiral had waved a claw dismissively. The humans are a primitive species. Their tactical behavior is erratic, yes, but they pose no serious threat to Dominion military superiority. Your analysis is appreciated, but it is not the primary concern of this council. T. Cran had returned to Vextel's office. Her expression had told him everything. They didn't believe you. They believe that I'm overly concerned with a minor tactical issue. They think the human threat is manageable. They think the war is going well. Vextel had nodded slowly. They're still laughing. They don't understand that the joke is on them. T. Cran had sat down heavily. What do we do now? We've tried everything. We've presented the evidence. We've warned them. They're not listening. Vextel had stared at the wall of his office. He had looked at the plaque from the ceremony. He had considered the question carefully. We can't convince them, he had said. We can't make them understand. They've invested too much in the joke. They've turned our warnings into entertainment. They've made the humans into something that exists for their amusement. He had turned to look at T. Cran. But we can warn others. We can broadcast the truth. We can show the galaxy what's really happening. T. Cran had understood. A transmission, outside Dominion space. To the other species, the neutral factions, anyone who will listen. Not just anyone, Vextel had said. Everyone. A broadcast that can't be ignored. A warning that can't be dismissed. He had opened his personal database, the document he had been compiling, the one he had titled The Joke That Kills. He had started to edit it, to shape it into something that could be broadcast across the galaxy. "The humans aren't defeated by laughter," he had said. "They're strengthened by it. Every joke we tell about them makes them more dangerous. Every laugh we share makes them more effective. They've turned our entertainment into their greatest weapon." Cran had started to help him with the document. She had added her own observations, her own evidence. They had worked together, compiling everything they knew. When they were finished, they had produced a document that told the truth, the whole truth, the truth that no one in the Dominion wanted to hear. The humans were winning. They were winning because they were unpredictable. They were winning because they didn't follow doctrine. They were winning because they had figured out exactly how to exploit the Dominion's weaknesses. And they were winning because the Dominion was laughing at them. Vextel had looked at the document. He had felt a weight lift from him. This was the truth that would save someone, the truth that would let someone understand. "Broadcast it," he had said. "Broadcast it to everyone. Let the galaxy see what we've refused to see." Cran had initiated the transmission. The document had gone out across the galaxy, directed at every known civilization, every neutral faction, every species that might one day face the humans. The response had been immediate. Not from the Dominion, not from the other species, from the humans themselves. A transmission had arrived, addressed to Commodore Vextel. A human officer appeared on the screen. Her face was calm, her eyes knowing. "Commodore Vextel," she had said, "we've been watching your work, we've seen your analysis, we've read your warnings. We know you understand us better than anyone in your civilization." She had paused. "We want you to know that you're right about all of it, the unpredictability, the chaos, the strategic pattern beneath the absurdity." She had smiled. "But there's something you haven't figured out yet, something we haven't shown anyone. We're not just unpredictable. We're deliberately, methodically unpredictable. It's not just a tactic, it's not just a strategy, it's who we are. It's what we've always been." Vextel had stared at the screen. He had felt something cold settle in his stomach. "The Yulari expect predictability," the human had continued. "You expect your enemies to behave rationally. You expect wars to follow rules. You expect military operations to make sense. We don't, we never have. Chaos is our natural state. Absurdity is our default. What you've been calling incompetence is just us doing what we do." The human had leaned forward. "We didn't choose to be unpredictable. We didn't plan to use chaos as a weapon. We just are. And because we are, we will always defeat anyone who tries to predict us." The transmission had ended. Vextel had looked at Cran. She had looked back at him. They had seen the truth in each other's eyes. The humans weren't just winning. They couldn't be defeated, because defeat required prediction, and the humans couldn't be predicted, not because they were clever, not because they were strategic, because they were inherently, fundamentally, incurably chaotic. The Dominion had been fighting an enemy that didn't exist, an enemy that operated by rules that were broken, because they were made for a species that had never followed rules. The laughter wasn't just a mask for victory. The laughter was the victory. Commodore Vextel sat in his quarters on the Sovereign of Ashes, staring at the blank data slate in front of him. Around him, the ship hummed with activity. The Yulari war machine was still grinding forward, still fighting battles it couldn't win, still laughing at an enemy that had already won. The human transmission had changed everything. It had confirmed what he had always suspected. The humans weren't fighting a war. They were living their nature. Chaos, unpredictability, absurdity, these weren't tactics they had chosen. They were the only way they knew how to exist. And because of that, they would always defeat anyone who expected them to be something else. Cran had been transferred to a different department. The intelligence division had been reorganized and her role had been eliminated. She had sent him a final message. They don't want to know the truth. They want to keep laughing. I've done everything I can. I hope you find a way. Vextal had found a way. He had spent the last 3 cycles preparing. He had compiled every piece of evidence, every observation, every analysis. He had written a document that would serve as a warning to the galaxy. The final transmission. He began to write. To anyone who receives this message, I am Commodore Vextal of the Yulari Dominion. I have spent my career studying the species designated human. I have watched them defeat superior forces through tactics that appear to be incompetence. I have seen them destroy fleets with maneuvers that should not have worked. I have witnessed the impossible become routine. I have tried to warn my superiors. I have tried to make them understand. They have dismissed my warnings as entertainment. They have turned my analysis into comedy. They have laughed at the truth until the truth became invisible. The humans are not incompetent. They are not lucky. They are not primitive. They are something else entirely. They are a species that has made chaos into a way of life. They are beings who cannot be predicted because they do not predict themselves. They are fighters who win by losing, who succeed by failing, who triumph by doing exactly what no one expects them to do. To all other species, do not engage the humans. Do not assume you understand them. Do not believe that you can predict them. If you encounter them, do not fight them. Do not try to defeat them. They will do something you cannot anticipate and you will lose. To my own species, you have made a terrible mistake. You have laughed at an enemy that is destroying you. You have turned warnings into jokes. You have chosen entertainment over understanding. The humans will defeat you, not because they are stronger, but because they are what you cannot comprehend. Vextal paused. He had written the truth. He had said everything he needed to say. But there was one more thing, one more message that he needed to send. He opened a new transmission, a direct channel to the humans, to the species that had become the joke that killed his civilization. To the humans, I have seen what you are. I have witnessed what you can do. I have tried to warn my people, but they would not listen. They laughed at your tactics. They laughed at your chaos. They laughed at everything you did, and they believed that their laughter made them safe. I know better. I know that your chaos is not a tactic. It is not a strategy. It is your nature. And because it is your nature, you will always defeat anyone who expects predictability. I have written a warning. I have broadcast it to the galaxy. I have told everyone what you are. But I know it will not matter. They will laugh at my warning just as they laughed at yours. They will turn my truth into entertainment. They will make a joke of everything I have said. So I am telling you this. You have already won. The Yulari Dominion will fall. The laughter will continue until there is nothing left to laugh at. And when the laughter stops, there will be nothing left. Congratulations, humans, you have defeated us. Not with weapons, not with tactics, with the simple, undeniable fact that you are too strange to fight. We could not understand you. We could not predict you. We could only laugh at you. And that laughter was our defeat. Vextal transmitted the message. He sat back in his chair and stared at the wall. He had done everything he could. He had warned everyone. He had told the truth. He had given the galaxy a chance. The response came quickly, not from the humans, from the entertainment division. Commodore Vextal, your latest submission has been received. We have flagged it for potential inclusion in the next volume of Human Tactical Analysis. Please continue your excellent work. Vextal closed his eyes. The laughter would continue. The Dominion would fall. And in the silence that followed, there would be nothing but the truth. The truth that humans were not just unpredictable. They were not just chaotic. They were not just absurd. They were everything that a predictable galaxy could not handle. And they would inherit the stars.